And then it's like, will the last festival in Australia turn the lights out, please? Because when you look at the list, it's like, Jesus, there's not much left. If we are to try and read between the lines of why this decision might have come about, is there any chance that this could be a bluff? We know that Peter Noble has used that event in the past, as a bargaining chip almost. He's been very critical of government. He's been around a long time. Could this be a bluff? Could this be, look, this operating environment sucks. It does for all events. Now I'm gonna dangle this, carrot and threaten to throw it off a bridge. You're not going to have this in your economy anymore. You're not going to have this. Like, it would draw people obviously from around the world, but around Australia, everywhere. We're going to pull this unless we talk. And maybe the government sees that event going and goes, crap.
From a government perspective, if they do go ahead with the cancellation after 2025, that is a huge gap in economy, in employment, in everything that needs to be filled. And you can't just start a festival tomorrow and expect it to be at the levels of Bluesfest. This is 35 years of being in the industry, building support within the community and also the local community in Byron Bay, as well as, across Australia. You can't just replace that tomorrow. So from a government perspective, I think they would be silly not to try and help out, Bluesfest and all the other festivals in this country.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Do you know what's crazy?
What?
In 3 months' time, we'll be on 7 years.
I thought you said we'll be on 7 News. I was like, mate, I don't know if that's the place you want to be at the moment, to be fair. Like, I know we dream big, but we'll probably do bigger than that.
But we'll be the change that
usher in the new cultural change. The Homebrewed boys are coming to shake up Channel 7.
No, it'll be 7 years in 3 months' time.
That's crazy.
It feels like 2 days ago we were talking about 6 years on radio.
Yeah. It happens really, really fast.
It really does.
And thank you for listening. If you're listening now, if you're new or old, really appreciate you actually tuning in and listening to us. And we'll say, since we've transitioned to the podcasting format, things have looked good. Things have been looking very good for us. Yeah,
it's all been positive feedback. And
yeah, it's been really fun for us too. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. I mean, the good thing about it, and hopefully, what our analytics tell us is that the audience is enjoying it because they're listening through. But the format that we now operate under seems to allow us a lot more room to go deep with artists where we previously wouldn't have had that space to do that because of radio formatting. So I hope you've been enjoying the longer, deeper chats. We have certainly enjoyed having them.
Oh yeah, I've loved, being able to go a little bit deeper into a topic and go on many more tangents than what we could have. And we still went on them on radio, but now we've got the free reign of going for as long as we want. It's nice to be able to go down paths and not worry, if this leads nowhere, then we've wasted time. It's like, it doesn't matter, The guests are always aware of, allow about an hour and we allow that time as well. So it's fine. And you listening, we're very transparent with you. You see how long the episode is and then you can make the decision of, yes, I have that time. Or, I'll listen half on my way to work and half on the way home, or you just go, nah, too long, skip.
Or I'll send a letter bomb, which has happened a few times, but not too bad.
Yeah. I also just want to quickly welcome not just you, the listener, but you, Eamonn, to my home.
I was like, where's he welcoming me? We're putting the home in Homebrewed for the first time in like some years now. At Cam's place.
Yeah, we used to do it was at my parents' place. We used to do the pandemic radio shows from Mum's place because you were around the corner. So it was more convenient for you to go to Mum and Dad's than driving 15 minutes to Gosford. And it was obviously very convenient for me because we did them in my bedroom. So I didn't ever need to, I only walked upstairs to get lunch and that was pretty much it. So yeah, it's been a little while since we've done a home recording of Homebrewed, but we are for this music news podcast. So if we sound more relaxed, it's because we're at home in an environment. Yeah,
no, exactly right. I was going to say I'm off the back of 3 nights camping too, so I'm like all at one with nature and stuff.
Well, and any furniture is comfortable compared to
camping. Actually, you know what? Just a funny tidbit. So I have like an extra cab ute, and usually I sleep in a rooftop tent when I go camping. I'm
literally looking out the window at Eamonn's ute right now, and I was looking to see whether he had the rooftop on. And I don't think I've ever seen it without the rooftop.
Just ladders at the moment because I was working on Friday. Anyway, long story short, I borrowed my father-in-law's swag to sleep in. And in the back of my mind, I was like, it was a real smash and grab operation. Didn't check anything, just grabbed it, chucked it in a rush. And I was like, I wonder if it's got the poles, because I know they have the poles. And, you know, lo and behold, I open it up and it doesn't. And so I've actually spent the last 3 nights just sleeping in the back of my canopy on top of like the drawer that's in there, using the thin mattress from the Swag. And it was actually, you know, like a just fit. It was pretty cozy and comfortable for what it was, but it was no soft bed, you know, because it's just a thin mattress onto a hard drawer on top. So when you're talking about furniture, I am genuinely appreciating some softness because my last 3 sleeps have been firm.
Yes, well, you know, good for your spine apparently.
Yeah, so they say. But with that in mind, now you have all the context as to when we're recording this. We're going to be talking tonight about festivals. Well, this afternoon about festivals in Australia. And two festivals we understand you'll be hearing some big lineups from this week. We are going to be touching on Bluesfest. Bluesfest first, our artist announcement does drop during the week. However, we are not recording in time for it to be able to included on this podcast. So it might seem a bit out of step if you're like, oh, Bluesfest, and the lineup was announced yesterday when this comes out, but you haven't, we don't reference it because we are recording prior. And same deal, we do understand that Lost Paradise is saying Wednesday. They'll be dropping theirs as well.
So the big lineup was revealed yesterday morning, supposedly, as you're listening to this, if you're listening to this on Thursday, which is when the pod drops. So yeah, that's why we're not talking about it, is because we're recording it ahead of time, which is currently Monday afternoon as we're recording this. So just a bit of context. But we are going to be talking about Bluesfest because there's more news than just the lineup. There's news, as I'm sure you're all aware, that they are going to call time on Bluesfest after the 2025 edition.
Yeah, massive news. Like really, really significant news. I mean, this is a festival that was ranked like number 9 in the world pretty recently by one of the measurements. It's regarded as one of the better festivals in the world, Australia's premier music festival, and has seemed relatively emerged relatively unscathed from a lot of the other issues that have plagued festivals in Australia, you know, excluding COVID, which we will touch on. But, you know, it's held strong. Tickets have sold. They've had good numbers through the gates. It's one of those institutions that feels almost immune from some of the other conditions.
Well, was it Splendor or was it Bluesfest that had the insurance payout the first year of COVID because there was gastro going around in Byron Bay? That was Bluesfest.
The Bluesfest.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I knew it was one of the Byron Bay ones, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah, they took out, what was it? It was like infectious or transmissible disease insurance for like a couple of years before COVID because there was a really bad gastro outbreak one year.
Yeah.
And that happened to cover them for COVID. So they were one of the only festival that got insured.
Yeah. And then obviously that insurance wasn't around anymore after COVID for obvious reasons. And that is one of the things that we'll be talking about relating to this news from Bluesfest is the cost of insurance and everything else around the festival. But yeah, it is sad to see Bluesfest hanging up the mics and amps and the stage and
double basses,
hanging up
drums and
everything, because it's been 35 years that Bluesfest has been around, which is, you know, one of the reasons it has become the premier festival in Australia, just because of its longevity. It's been a constant, you know, almost like you hear about rite of passage for a lot of things. And I think for a lot of musicians, getting the chance to play Bluesfest was, okay, awesome. Like I've made it, I've ticked that box.
Well, Central Coast band Little Quirks actually said as much on the comment following the announcement of the cancellation of Bluesfest that it was a career highlight for them. And they actually went and used that in their kind of promo afterwards. But what pricked our interest, obviously it's a huge loss. And when you look at the casualty list, it's pretty bad. I mean, Splendor, no word on Splendor. Falls Festival, we haven't heard anything about a lineup. I don't think I will do a live production check of that. But
Spilt Milk, Groove in the Moo,
and a bunch of other smaller ones, but still significant of all candor. And now you've got the biggest festival in Australia saying we're not going to go ahead post 2025. And what struck us both reading it was it's got a lot of read between the lines energy to it, particularly, you know, some of the comments from Peter Noble, who's the director and founder of the festival, and things like that seem like it's not simply we're hanging it up because we're going out in the high, you know, we've given all we can. It feels like, you know, we're frustrated that we have to do this, but it feels like the only choice.
Yeah, and we're going to, I guess, break down what we believe. You know, if we are to read between the lines, we're going to try and break down what we think Peter Noble might be saying. But in his statement, he said, "To my dear Bluesfest family, and after more than 50 years in the music business, Bluesfest has been a labour of love, a celebration of music, community, and the resilient spirit of our fans. But after the 2025 festival, as much as it pains me to say this, it's time to close this chapter. As I said earlier this year, at Bluesfest 2024, next year's festival will be our last. To my dear Bluesfest family, I want to make it the most unforgettable experience yet. If you've been thinking about it, now is your last chance to experience our beloved festival." So that was his statement. And one of my immediate reactions to you, Eamon, was 2025 is going to be huge and there is zero chance they don't sell out.
Totally.
For people who have never been to a blues fest, they'll go, "This is my last chance, I'm buying a ticket." For people who've been going pretty much every year, they'll go, "I have to buy a ticket, it's the last." And chances are it's going to be a pretty good lineup as well, given it will be their last. So on that front, it's going to be a success, I would think, which is maybe a bit reassuring.
Yeah,
given everything
one
that's
will
going
do
on.
well.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll have more an insight at, well, when you're listening to this, we'll have an insight as to who those first lot of artists are, because they would have been dropped, I think, on the day before we put this one out. So it will be big in terms of artists. You can only imagine who they're going to get. And yeah, it will absolutely sell out, you'd think. This is a huge event, but it just represents this really big loss. And if we are to try and read between the lines of why this decision might have come about, there is, of course, the simple, Peter Noble, been around a long time. The event's been around a very long time. They've consistently done quite well, albeit with, some hiccups and dips and stuff along the way, but very strong festival. And maybe they're just going, "Look, mate, like, we've done all we can with this event. We don't want to run it into the ground and have to end it because no one's rocking up anymore." So maybe they are calling it. But the other things that sprung to mind were the operating environment for festivals generally. So maybe there's a bit more writing on the wall in terms of these good times aren't going to continue. Maybe after this long in the industry, the festival's just gone like, "Look, we don't want to put up with this anymore." And what we reference in that is kind of insurance costs, which Cam, you mentioned, and we've been speaking about how ridiculous they've become.
Yeah, there was an article that I read saying that there was a pub in Adelaide quoting a quadruple of their insurance costs since the pandemic restrictions were lifted. So the public liability insurance, this Adelaide pub went from 10 grand to 40 grand as a result of its live music component. So you can imagine what these festivals are having to fork out.
Yeah, enormous amounts, and they wouldn't have got any easier. And the other thing that sprung to mind for me was police costs. I don't think blues is like a particularly high-risk event, but we do know that the cops tell you how many cops you need at your event, and you have to pay per police person that's there, and you don't get a say in kind of anything beyond that. Yeah, the fee is a fee. The amount that they say is required is the amount that's required, and you're up for however much. And there's also that kind of whole New South Wales Festival Act 2019 legacy, which we saw referenced as the reason for the return to Rio Festival in Wiseman's Ferry's cancellation earlier this year as well. Is that playing a role too? And just the generally restrictive operating environment for festivals is what we already know in terms of issues with ticket sales and how people are buying them, the money in it generally, the model, all of these questions, cost of living. But we also know that Peter Noble has been very quick to, criticise government and push government when needed as well, and has been very critical of New South Wales governments in the past and how they've kind of handled his event, the support they have and haven't received.
Yeah, well, I remember it was around the time that Mountain Sounds went into liquidation because of, the new red tape and around policing and legislation and all of that, the increased costs that come along with running a music festival. I remember around that time, we spoke about it in Bluesfest, Peter Noble was threatening to move it away from Byron Bay and into Queensland because they have much looser restrictions around putting on a festival and therefore less cost involved as well.
Yeah, he was because we know it's like a huge economic contributor to the New South Wales economy, an event of that scale going on. You've got roughly like 70 plus thousand people going to the event, which is just huge for a 3-day event like that. And looking at the attendance numbers, 2022 post-COVID, they had about 100,000 plus, which was huge, but it had been after 2 years of cancellations. 2023, 70,000, and this year Peter Noble said at least equal to 2023, although I haven't been able to find an exact number.
Which feels like, if that's the way you're quoting the attendance, it feels like maybe it's not as good as you were expecting.
Maybe, yeah.
Like, it was about the same as last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, these comments were made immediately after the 2024 event wrapped. So he said we're still counting, but then I wasn't able to find, just their attendance numbers.
Yeah, okay.
Not to say it's not there, I just couldn't find it.
And, I guess you look at 2022, it's, the post-COVID return. So there was 100,000 people there, which at that time, there was a lot of hype around live music. Just people so keen to see live music again because we couldn't for 2 years during COVID. Then 2023, they dropped to 70,000 people, which obviously you've then got people coming down from the post-COVID rush of wanting to see live music. You've got increased cost of living pressures in 2023, which has continued to increase here. And then also the 2023 festival was the year that Sticky Fingers were announced. And then you had King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard withdraw. Sampa the Great also pulled out of the festival. Sticky Fingers were then taken away from the lineup as well. So there was a bit of controversy around that one. And then this year, 2024, getting the same figures as that with, as we know, the climate at the moment. The trend does seem to, when you look at all the circumstances around it and not just the numbers, it makes sense, I think, as to the way the attendances were rolling.
Yeah, and from what I could gather, they kind of count their heyday as getting about 85,000. So 100,000 was the anomaly. That wasn't what they always got. 85,000, I think, is that kind of early to mid 2010s. Around the time when they had like Kendrick Lamar on the lineup and those kind of massive ones, and they would get about 85,000. So it is below, but not surprisingly so, and probably not to an extent, without knowing the ins and outs, but probably not to an extent that it would cancel the event. You're 15,000 down, but you still have 70,000 people going to the event. It's not, it's not like you're struggling, I would imagine. But
yeah, well, percentage-wise, I guess it'd still be pretty decent compared to, when you look at Splendor when they didn't sell out for the first time in its history a few years ago. Like the percentage-wise, the decrease in attendance, it's probably on trend with everything else.
Yeah, for sure. So that's interesting. But yeah, the economic data of the event. So the most detailed data I could find was 2022.
I was going to say we love data. We don't really. I mean, I don't know about you, Eamon. I don't speak for you, but data I enjoy, but also I'm like, oh God, like numbers, data, facts. More interested, I guess, in opinions and nuance and conversation. But it is crucial to have these figures because it helps create the nuance in the conversation.
It does. It puts it into perspective. And as we said, it's a massive event. So from the 22 event, they said a total output of 142 million in Byron Shire, 254 million in Northern Rivers, 416 million in New South Wales, and 459 million in Australia. That was its output.
It's insane.
So Australia-wide, you're at almost $500 million from one event over 3 days. Like, obviously, there's more prep and pack up associated. It's not just 3 days, but it's huge.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Yeah.
$500 million. Like, it's
huge. And the estimated total income that they had, which is wages and salaries, $25 million worth of people getting paid. In Byron Shire, 57 million Northern Rivers, 97 million in New South Wales, and 108 million in Australia. So over $100 million worth of wages being paid alone. It's very big. 641 full-time equivalent employment positions in Byron Shire, 1,348 in the Northern Rivers, over 2,000 in New South Wales, 2,149 in Australia.
It's a lot of jobs.
It's a lot of jobs.
Across Australia. A lot of jobs and a lot of money generated for the economy. So it is going to be a big loss when the festival stops. And that is the point of us bringing you those numbers. It wasn't just to talk about it. It was to say this is what we're losing from the economy when the festival goes. And when we've already spoken about, the combination, I guess, costs to the economy of all the other festivals closing, as well as the impact it has on the arts industry itself, like the musicians and the people within the industry not getting that opportunity to showcase their talents, etc. But yeah, when you look at the numbers of financially and as well as the number of people employed, and when you compound that with every other economic pressure at the moment, it is a massive loss.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, and as you said, couple that with every other event that's being cancelled. And that kind of leads to the next point. And one of the thoughts that I had was that, is there any chance that this could be a bluff? And the reason I say that is because we know money and numbers talk, and we know Peter Noble, who runs Bluesfest, along with a massive team there, but he's the founder. He has long used this event to influence and pressure government. He's been critical of government, in ways that we would support. We're not saying that's a bad thing at all. As you mentioned, Cam, before, the threats to take it to Queensland when New South Wales wasn't offering enough, he knew that it was a draw card. The state government doesn't want to see these events go at the end of the day, particularly one of that scale, the smaller
For the
ones.
reasons we just listed, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been very outspoken about how difficult the operating environment is and how things could and should be easier for festivals. We also know during COVID, he was on Bluesfest was on the receiving end of one of the most infamous COVID closures in 2021, when Brad Hazzard, who was the health minister at the time, pulled the plug on the event.
Forgot about that.
24 hours out from gates opening, they had people already camping there ready to go into the festival.
Yes.
Which,
yeah.
I mean, you can blame the fog of COVID at the time, but I think even at the time, it was just terrible management, whichever way, based on one case that was not near where the event was, God,
that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Hazzard.
Faded into obscurity. But yeah, so we know that Peter Noble has used that event in the past, as a bargaining chip almost. He's been very critical of government. He's been around a long time. So the thought that I had, could this be a bluff? Could this be, look, this operating environment sucks. It does for all events. Now I'm gonna dangle this, carrot and threaten to throw it off a bridge. You're not going to have this in your economy anymore. You're not going to have this. It would draw people obviously from around the world, but around Australia, everywhere. We're going to pull this unless we talk. And maybe the government sees that event going and goes, crap.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as you said, he's sort of got a bit of history in using the event to sort of champion his own causes. And this would be an all-time bluff to come out. It's more than saying, we could potentially move the festival to Queensland because of what's happening in New South Wales. This is, we have announced the festival is stopping after 2025. It's not hypothetical. It's a potential unless the government throws in some money for funding for festivals. They've announced it. So it would be an all-time bluff if they then turn around and say, jokes. Government have thrown in money, we're all good. And that was their intention the whole time. But it should really, from a government perspective, we've mentioned the numbers there. If they do go ahead with the cancellation after 2025, that is a huge gap in economy, in employment, in everything that needs to be filled. And you can't just start a festival tomorrow and expect it to be at the levels of Bluesfest. This is 35 years of being in the industry, building support within the community and also the local community in Byron Bay, as well as, across Australia. You can't just replace that tomorrow. So from a government perspective, I think they would be silly not to try and help out, Bluesfest and all the other festivals in this country. But as I guess Ruby Miles pointed on when we spoke to her a few weeks back, was that the governments are always sad about the musicians and what it means to musicians for the festivals being cancelled, but they're not necessarily sympathetic to a music festival being cancelled because of all of the negative, I guess, associations that come along with a music festival.
Yeah, but then maybe Bluesfest is one of the few outlying examples of the opposite.
And it should be. It should be. You mentioned, despite having, 70 to 85,000 people there on average, they're not a high risk event.
No, never have been. So it's really interesting. Yeah, you have to think, maybe, the announcement is legitimate. I'm not saying it's not legitimate. However, they're kind of in the back of their mind, and this is all just speculation, but it has that feel to it, Rolling Stones last ever tour 7 times.
John Farnham retirement tour for tours, yeah.
They might just go, actually, because it's so loved and revered. And you'd have to, maybe in the back of their mind, they'd have every intention if things stay the same of calling it quits in 2025. But if someone from the New South Wales government or local governments pick up the phone, which you imagine they would after an announcement like this, and they actually start having some conversations, and then they are listened to in terms of why the operating environment is so bad. Maybe if they saw changes there, better funding, less restriction, a bit more, functional, maybe they would reverse that decision. And that would be something that benefits all festivals too.
Yeah, and as you said, this could be a very legitimate cancellation. Like they could very well say, as you mentioned, because of the way that they're operating at the moment within the climate, they could be saying after 2025, it's not going to be tenable for us to continue. So let's make this announcement and hope that, because they've announced it, relatively, it's not like by the way, next week, this is our last ever Bluesfest. They've given enough time. So if there were government support to take place, they've given time for that to happen. Maybe they've made this announcement with full intention to postpone or to cancel continuing to do festivals beyond 2025 if nothing changes. But maybe in that they were hoping that making this announcement, it would spark change.
Yeah. And they've got 1 to 2 years. 1 to 2 years for things to change or conversations to be had or governments to change. So this current state government will be right near the end of its term. What year is it? 2024, 2025. Okay, so it'll have probably about a year. It's 2022 elections that Chris Minns' government was, or 2023. I don't know. Maybe it would just be midterm, but I thought there might be a political thing there too, where if a government is towards the end of their term, then it becomes a vote winner. We will support Bluesfest to continue. And maybe then you end up having both major parties, as we saw at the last election, realizing that fighting on live events is actually a good thing for votes and coming through there. So there might be a whole bit of strategy here. It might all be hogwash and they are just ready to call it quits. But just based on what we've seen of Peter Noble in the past, knowing we've got a couple of years for things to change, it wouldn't be surprising if this was not a bluff, but a last play.
And you would like to think that there could potentially be a joint initiative here by the state and federal governments to supply funding because, we mentioned it's not just raising revenue for Byron Shire or even New South Wales. So 416 million in New South Wales, 459 across Australia. So that's significant money across all of the country. So if you can have a joint effort from both, they're both Labor Guardies. Government and parties combined is a Guardi, apparently.
Oh, okay, yeah, government parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ruling Guardi.
Yeah, that's what all the kids are saying now, don't you?
It's
catch up
trend.
with the lingo, yeah. No, they're both Labor governments in power. Too many P's and G's. And you know what I'm trying to say? They're both the same party. It's not like you're going to try and have a Liberal and a Labor government joining on an initiative that's just not going to happen. So they're both Labor. You'd like to think that they could come together and form an initiative that would help fund. I mean, as you mentioned, hopefully it can help benefit every music festival in this country, not just Bluesfest. But if we are going to try and say Bluesfest, I think that's certainly worthwhile.
Yeah, totally. And I like Peter Noble's been a long advocate for the industry, and this would be a massive play for the industry if it is true. But either way, thank you for indulging us. It will be we have kind of 2 years to watch and for things to hopefully change because you don't want to see the loss of Bluesfest.
No, and as been mentioned since this announcement, it's not just a blues music festival. It started that way, but it's evolved into, you've mentioned there were headliners like Kendrick Lamar, and we've had some of the biggest artists in the world performing at Bluesfest. So it would be a real shame to lose a premier festival in this country.
Yeah, totally would. And then it's like, will the last festival in Australia turn the lights out, please? Because when you look at the list, it's like, Jesus, there's not much left. Like there are, of course, and a lot of the small events, might be the future, and we're about to talk about one. But in terms of those, endlessly, like tied at the hip to Australian music culture was Splendour in the Grass, was Bluesfest, was Falls Festival, was Groove in the Moo. And all of those are, mate, well, some are hiatus, some are gone, some are going.
Yeah, it just feels like you look back only 2 years ago and they were it felt like they were generating momentum. It felt like, okay, the return to music festivals, everything's going to be bigger and better than ever. And just as the whole combination of everything going on, it's actually become very unstable.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but not on the Central Coast.
Hey.
Funnily enough. So
Coastie boys are number one.
That's right.
We are treble winners.
We are treble winners.
We have to always bring it back to the Mariners, but anyway. We're not talking about them. We're talking, of course, about rolling sets. They're doing pretty well with the first round of ticket sales.
Really good. So Rolling Sets was announced, obviously, between cycles for our music news.
Which was annoying.
Stuff on our socials.
I'll admit it was annoying from them not to give us a heads up.
Yeah, come on, guys. I mean, we just push your lineup announcement back a week so it lines up with our music news.
Don't you know that we're the most listened to podcast in the world?
In the world.
They'd have been 100% sold out by now if they gave it to us. But instead, the losers are only at 70% of ticket sales sold within its first day of sales. No, that's a joke. That is very good numbers, particularly for a festival. It's only in its third year. So I mentioned before, Bluesfest having that longevity in the industry, and that would help with, the trust within the community and, booking artists and people having trust that the festival is going to go ahead. This is only its third year running for Rolling Sets, and it's 70% sold out within the first day of tickets going on sale, which is a fantastic effort.
Yeah, that's like absolutely unheard of at the moment, I think, for most events. 70% in the first day, unreal. They say the third album of an artist is very defining. I think the same could be said for festivals. You got year 1 and 2, beautiful, woohoo. And then maybe the novelty's worn off by year 3. Or you could predict, but obviously that's not what's happened on the coast. And it's interesting to consider why that might be.
I think one of the main reasons is, and we spoke about this recently with an artist that you'll be hearing that episode, I think, next week. I think we're dropping that episode with the local artist Coma, but we spoke with him about it briefly, that I think one of the main reasons is the Central Coast has been so thirsty for live music in the area because we have all these, and we've spoken about it so many times, so apologies if you've heard us rant about this before, but we've got recording studios on the Central Coast, some of the best in the world are here on the Central Coast. We've got amazing talent coming through, but where do they play? Nowhere. And then we've slowly, with Drifters and Mumbos and Lincoln Pin, all these little venues coming up around the area that we're now, local artists are getting that opportunity to perform live in front of an audience. And for so long, we've just been wanting to see live music on the Central Coast. Rolling Sets has now come here, which will be its third year in a row. And I think that is one of the reasons, because the locals just want to go to a music festival. And the fact that it's happening at the entrance foreshore is just amazing. It's not the best in terms of getting there for public transport and all of that. No train line, and you need to get a bus or drive or find an apartment or, whatever you're doing. It's not necessarily a central location, but the fact that it's happening on the coast, people are prepared to inconvenience themselves in trying to get there because they can get there because it's on the Central Coast. They don't need to go to Sydney or Maitland or Newcastle to see an event like this. Yeah,
100%. And it's I think the size of it too, I was thinking about this, could play a pretty big role. I mean, we have spoken ad nauseum about what's going on with events at the moment, but Rolling Sets isn't a huge event by festival standards. It's packed into that memorial park. It actually flows and works really nicely. So credit to whoever kind of designed how it's going to be set up. But it's not over full. So I think their ticketing numbers could play a really big role. And then, of course, there's just that parochialism of people just living on the coast going, we've got an event, we may as well go, which is exactly the attitude you want. But, yeah, I think, they're not trying to sell – I don't know how many people go, but I don't imagine they're trying to sell 20,000 tickets looking at how many people have been there over the last couple of years. It's small enough and relative to the area size that you could pretty much count on enough people coming from out of town and then, of course, enough locals buying up tickets. Even, the bands and all of their friends and crew that associate with local bands, which they've done really well this year. You've got Joel Leggett, Stupid Baby, Shacked, Jan, Tiali Tyrants, Layeza, who are a new band from the coast. It's good to see them on a bill like that quick. Lemon Joe, Hand Models as well, I think a local, excuse me if I'm getting it wrong. But yeah, really good roster of local acts that are going to get locals through the gates.
And you mentioned they've been good at this as well. The Moving Stills were on the lineup last year or the year before, from memory. Tiali was on last year as well. I think Little Quirks potentially were on one. But the point being that they've been very good at also giving locals an opportunity to perform at a pretty decent sized music festival, which was also one of the hallmarks of Mountain Sounds Festival as well. So many locals would first cut their teeth at a local music festival and then go, oh, cool. And then they do well there. The same sort of promoters, this is a Triple J sponsored event. They'll go, oh, hey, we also do thousands of other things with live music. These guys were pretty good. Let's get them on this bill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's awesome, as you said there, to see some locals on the lineup. And of course, if you did miss it, the headliners are the Wombats, which is a New South Wales exclusive, which is also a pretty good pull for the Central Coast.
I thought that was pretty massive. I mean, the Wombats are no strangers to Australia. They're over here about 3 times a year. But to have them playing at Rolling, so I was surprised by, in a good way. Yeah, and then Lime Cordial, G Flip Rule, Peach PRC, More Rat Old Mervs, the Grogans, Coterie, South Summit, Surf Trash, Lola Scott, the Good Kids, Jet City Sports Club, the Blossoms, Surf Trash. There's heaps.
Can I just say, South Summit, I feel like are a band that are on so many festival lineups in sort of the last 12 to 18 months, and I'm all for it.
Totally.
Like they're a band who, I've just remembered, they're our infamous 3-minute recording interview band that we had during COVID. It was, if you haven't heard the story before, it was a at-home recording isolated via Zoom, and well, it wasn't Zoom, it was another platform which you have to upload your audio locally on your own device, and only 3 minutes of such were uploaded. So we sat down and spoke to them for probably, 35, 40 minutes. It was the radio days, but we typically went a bit longer for the pre-recorded ones like it was during COVID, and then sort of edited down a little bit for radio. And then, went to put it all together, and I've gone, there's only 3 minutes. And we spoke to all 5 of them. They were in the same room at the same time chatting to us. It was a really fun chat. And we just never actually got to put it to air. So South Summit, if you are somehow listening to this, we would like to right that wrong.
Yeah, sorry about that. It happens. Everyone gets one. You completely destroy at least one interview if you do this long enough. We've all seen it.
Yeah, but the point on that is since, that was probably, 3 years ago that we spoke to them, and we've sort of been following them since. But I feel like I catch them on a lot of festival lineups, both, in WA where they're from, but also here in New South Wales and across the country as well. It's exciting to see them, and they'll be here on the Central Coast.
That they will be, and we can't really even claim the success then because the interview never went to air.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the conversation we had inspired them so much.
That's right.
Yeah, it wasn't the fact that everyone heard the interview and gone, let's check out these guys. It was we spoke to them, which inspired them in the music they created since.
Yeah, that's exactly
We're running with that.
We are responsible. That's all you need to know for their success. But yeah, the rolling set's fantastic news. And if I can peel back the live chat curtain, live chat? What are they called? Group chats. Excuse me. The group chat curtain of myself and my mates, just to show how this parochialism works. One mate messages, surely we're all going to Rolling Sets this year, yeah? Question mark on the day the tickets drop. And then my other mate goes, name one Wombat song. And he goes, I got none, but it's a festival on the Central Coast with my mates. May as well go. And then, everyone was in furious agreement about that. So that would have been happening in group chats all across the Central Coast. We got an event in the area. You're going to have a good time. I mean, you have to be pretty snobby not to. Let's go.
It's funny because if you said to me, name one Wombat song, I could have easily told you many because I've seen them, I think I've seen them 3 times. So I can definitely name a bunch of their songs. Actually, their new album, very good if you haven't heard it. I do definitely recommend it. But Lime Cordial on the gig as well. I mean, how are they not going to be just so much fun?
Yeah.
Especially in that music festival environment. G Flip full of energy and, they'd get the crowd rocking as you'd expect. Rule, Peach PRC, Morat as well. Like Morat is just like an Australian, like a darling of Aussie music, it feels like.
For sure. And sure, the Grogans is one that really caught my eye too. I really want to see the Grogans. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And then, I mean, as we said, those local bands, like I want to, we got Shacked, Jan, Tialio, who were all friends of the show, Tyrants, and who we haven't spoken to yet, but I like what they do, Joel Leggett. Like, they're all artists that I want to see. So to have them all there as well, it's another pool. So props to Rolling Sets, 70% sold. Get yours if you haven't already. Just go to the Rolling Sets Instagram, follow everything there.
Yeah, and if you're liking local festivals as well, as we mentioned right at the top of this, Lost Paradise will have dropped their lineup. And
yes,
Glenworth Valley's coast.
It is.
Is it technically a suburb of the Central Coast, or is it Central Coast adjacent?
I think it's Central Coast. I don't know. I just know it's still Darkingjung country because that's what's like listed on the website and everything like that. So
Glenworth Valley is a suburb of the Central Coast Council local government area in the Central Coast region of New South Wales, Australia. It's about 73 kilometres north of Sydney and 20 kilometres west of Gosford.
We are the biggest LGA in New South Wales.
Oh, we'd have to be up there.
But I think population per capita, we're the biggest in Australia. But
do you want to have a guess, according to the 2016 census, of what the population of Glenworth Valley was?
Valley, jeez, 3,482.
10.
No way.
Apparently, according to the 2016 census, it had a population of 10 people.
That's right. More people live in Glenworth Valley than Australia has music festivals at the moment. So
that is true. I mean, this is on Wikipedia that Google search was sourcing from. But when you think about it, Glenworth Valley is a lot of land.
It's huge. And on the festival chat too, just for what it's worth, Rolling Set's doing so well, small, boutique-y, I suppose less boutique, but smaller event.
Like, I guess they've got sort of like skating activations and other things around the festival. It's not just, it's mainly about the music, but there are other things to do. You can go on a Ferris wheel.
Oh, I would highly recommend too. I had probably the best Ferris wheel of my life there, genuinely. But
who was performing when you on the Ferris wheel?
DMAs.
Yes, nice.
Yeah, DMAs, because I remember watching it and I was like, this is funny. But the view, I've said this before, the view up the entrance, I've never seen the entrance from that angle. I thought it was magical.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's doing so well because it's a small event. They know what they're doing. They've targeted to the right audience. People are responding. Lost Paradise, who, as we said, the lineup will be out. They do a very similar thing. And then another one of those events, Lost Paradise has that more boutique-y feel, I guess, but it's smaller. It's got a warmer feel to it, having been to it compared to maybe your Forzes and some of the other New Year's ones. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a strong year from Lost Paradise as well, because it has that, doing those things right.
Yeah, well, it's like got the yoga activations and there's, other sort of creative things around the music festival, which if it's a New Year's festival and you're going hard, sometimes you might just want an afternoon of, let's do yoga or let's do something that's separate from the music, which I think's it's pretty cool. And there's I guess a different format as well, because it's not just a one-day festival. You are camping overnight, but pretty good place to be camping overnight. Beautiful as well, location, at Glenworth Valley.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, we don't know how it's going to go, but fingers crossed, and that they've got a recipe for success too. But I suppose the Central Coast is bucking the trend of festivals in Australia at the moment, at least. So long may that continue.
So in summary, the Central Coast are the leaders in Australian music.
Absolutely.
At the moment.
Absolutely. And
it's all thanks to the Homebrewed boys.
You're welcome. You're most welcome. But that is our music news for this fortnight. Hope you did enjoy it. And a timely reminder, hope you're enjoying what you're listening to. If you are, I can't say like, share, subscribe because this isn't YouTube. I mean, yeah.
Well, actually, it could be.
Yeah.
This podcast does go up to YouTube.
It does now. It does. So but do all that stuff. If you like what we're doing, share the word, please. We ask that humbly from you because we want to continue this growth and we want to do all that good stuff. But thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed. Love you.
How sweet. That was to me, right?
That was to you.
Not the audience.
Love you too, Ken. Yeah, how was that? I know you enjoyed it. You really, really liked it. Anyway, if you like what you have heard and you want to see more, www.homebrewed.au is the place to find it. And of course, all of our work is done on Darkingjung country. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We will see you next time.
It sounds like the dodgy cable too.
I think you're right, and I'm hand holding as well. Hand holding. Hold it. No, it is. How the fuck did I manage that? I could have sworn I put the dodgy one on top, and I burrowed down to the bottom to get it, but it must have been the other way around.
You had a 1 in 3 shot of getting the dodgy cable, and you did.
I did. My really good at picking things. That's what you should know. Betting tips come to me.